Lisa M. Lane is a historian, a retired college history professor, and an author of historical fiction, including Before the Time Machine, the Tommy Jones Mystery Series, and more. From her home in San Diego, she creates immersive, atmospheric stories that feel like mini vacations to historic London. In today's Behind the Book, Lisa shares her insights on the creation of her latest in the Tommy Jones Mystery Series titled Murder at the Gasworks. What is the story's premise?
The story starts in 1860 London, where a body has been found, because this is a murder mystery. So the body is that of Joe Carter, who was a stoker at the City of London Gasworks. And the 10-year-old boy who also works at the gasworks, Tommy Jones, ends up being the only one accused of the crime. So Sergeant Slaughter, who has previously done basically desk duty, ends up on the case because of the illness of the inspector who was assigned originally. And he has to overcome his shyness to get the job done and solve the crime.
How would you describe the protagonist's journey?
Sergeant Cuthbert Slaughter is an interesting guy. He's very well read, very bookish. He spent, he spent a number of years working at Bow Street Station in the back room, helping other people solve their cases. But for a while now, and he's getting a little older, he's been a functionary working for the Commissioner of the City of London Police, Daniel Harvey, who was a real person. The challenge is that in this case, he really has to be the front man because he ends up taking over for an inspector, and he very quickly realizes that there was a similar case of the murder of a stoker across the river that had been handled by the Metropolitan Police. Now, the two police forces, the City of London Police, in which Slaughter works, and the Metropolitan Police, have been rivals, to put it kindly, for a long time. But he contacts an inspector at the Metropolitan Police who worked on the other dead stoker case, and the two of them end up collaborating. And in that collaboration, Slaughter realizes that he needs to step up, that he needs to lean in, that he needs to overcome some of his reticence about talking to other people and interviewing important people, which tends to tongue-tie him a little bit, in order to save this 10-year-old boy from the gallows.
What inspired the story?
I had written a number of Tommy Jones mysteries, and in the first one, where he was 12 years old, there was a hint of a backstory for him, and I had not written that backstory. I had moved forward from 1862. He had been either a major or sometimes just a minor character in the other books, and I felt I needed to tell his story, how he got to be who he was. In particular, because he turns into such a wonderful, kind, gentle, intelligent person, and yet his background, very poor, living in a workhouse for part of his life, desperate straits when he was a child. How could somebody with that kind of impoverished background turn into the wonderful person that Tommy would become? And I really wanted to answer that question. So that was one inspiration for the story. The other inspiration was more technological. Even today, you can see around London these gigantic structures. They are large and round and iron and ornate. They sometimes dominate, like at the Oval in Kennington, the skyline. And these were gas holders that held the gas inside in a tank that expanded and contracted, held the gas that was used to light the streets of London, and light up people's homes. And they are still there. In fact, there has been recent efforts to save them because a number of them were torn down. And now they're building flats, apartments inside them and condominiums. And now they're becoming these elegant examples of restoration. And I was curious because that means that people were living in their houses next to these monstrosities that held gas that could explode at any moment, that was being piped into their homes. And I wondered how that gas was made, where it came from, who was involved, how it got to people's houses, what these big gas holders were. And that was the inspiration for the setting of the murder and the setting of the action that takes place in the book.
Do you have a favorite character in the story, and why?
Yes, I would say, aside from my protagonist, Cuthbert Slaughter, and aside from young Tommy Jones, I would have to say my favorite is Lady Emily Peel. She was also a real person. She was the wife of Sir Robert Peel, his father was the one, Robert Peel, who had founded the Metropolitan Police. But this was his son. He was also very active in Parliament. And he married Lady Emily Hay when she was quite young. I saw a photograph, and in the photograph you can see she's with two dogs. And I was very curious about the dogs, and I found out these were her prized borzois that she had gotten from the Tsar of Russia. And she loved them so much. Something about her just said she was a confident woman, not just because of her station, but because of her personality. Lady Emily Peel is the first character that I have ever written because I looked at a photograph. But there was just something about her, and she ended up taking a larger and larger role in the story, particularly once I found out that she was involved in a court case of a common thief named Eliza Feltham. Eliza apparently had stolen some doilies from Lady Emily's stand at a charity fair. And then, after Eliza was arrested and put on trial, Lady Emily, and this is in the court records of the Old Bailey, showed up in court to defend her. And I just thought, what kind of woman is that? What an amazing person. And so she's my favorite character in this book.
Was there a piece of historical research that has stayed with you since you discovered it?
There's a lot of them, actually. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of reading in the Illustrated London News and a lot of reading in the newspapers. And I ended up doing a lot of reading in Gasworks journals, the kind that people who work there would pass around. Also a lot about banking for this particular one, because there's a bank fraud story that's part of this tale. But the one that I remember that just kind of caught my eye, very short, just a few lines in the newspaper, was just a little report that a body had been found of a City of London Gasworks inspector dead in his flat, and they had concluded it was apoplexy. There were no other articles. The person wasn't even named. As a historian, this is like, there's no way to find out more. Apoplexy was a very wastebasket kind of diagnosis when you really didn't know what had happened, but it seemed to be sudden. So it could have been a heart attack, it could have been a stroke, it could have been anything, really. But I found it very intriguing that they mentioned he was a City of London Gasworks inspector. And yeah, I've kind of hung on to that. It sort of tells you about the limits of doing historical research. I can't find out anything else about this guy. I can't find out anything else about what happened. And it's those gaps, in the historical record. That's where I enjoy writing fiction. is where those spaces are. Someday I might write a story about the inspector, because it's that kind of thing that, yeah, it stays with me because there's a gap in the knowledge.
Lisa's books, including Murder at the Gasworks, can be found at your favorite online bookstore and by request at your public library. Thanks for joining us at Behind the Book. Happy reading!